Kong Jing's body snapped around midair, panic seizing his face.
Father!
Soren's fingertips pressed into the bow's frozen spine. True chi from the celestial demon 9 metamorphoses flooded his arm meridians. Hot, dense, moving like magma through his bones. The joints crackled in a rapid, grinding rhythm. The heaven, sundering Sunday bow groaned under his touch, a long, ugly sound that chewed at the ears. He pulled the string further, 70% of its limit, the arc bending wrong. The air twisted. Dust and loose stone lifted, spinning into a tightening spiral around him. No arrow yet existed, but white light bled through the dark, painting every wall of Dusk Valley in corpse. Pale tones. The old man's face wrenched into horror. His body swelled with a thunderous crack, exploding outward into the true form of a cyan blue peacock dozens of jangs high. His wings swept forward, crossing into a shield, before he'd even finished the thought. Soren stopped drawing. 2 fingers opened. Crack. The strings released tore the air like cheap silk. White light shattered into a sky full of scattered sparks. The arrow ripped across the valley, dragging a tail of distorted sight, and hit the old woman. Her face went white under the glare. She flung out a crimson plume, feather. No time to aim it, no time to twist away. The arrow was just there. The detonation shook the world. Her human shell collapsed, the peacock's true form burst out of it, already dying. Against that white light, the colossal fiend body held no more substance than paper. The arrow punched through her chest and blew a hole several jang wide out her back. Blood sprayed across the cliff face in a radial fan. Shredded heart tissue and broken feathers drifted down. A soft, wet rain. 1 arrow, 1 core formation stage fiend. Dead. The old peacock's wings jerked open again, his whole body shuddering. He reared his head and shrieked toward the peak. The sound was nothing but grief, pure, piercing, absolute. The shriek churned the wind into a gale. Scree lifted from the valley floor. Shredded leaves and bloody mist danced in crazed spirals. Atop the cliff, ink-black hunting robes snapped like war banners. Soren's dark hair whipped across his face. His body stood straight as a rule. The noise seemed to bore him. He lifted the longbow again, slow and deliberate. The string hummed, low and faint. Killing intent hardened into something needle, sharp, fixed dead on the enraged, grieving old fiend. He raised an eyebrow. The enormous peacock's plumage ruffled outward in a single panicked burst. The shriek choked off mid-cry, strangled silent. His wings flapped twice, confused, helpless, and then he did not dare make another sound. Soren lowered the bow. The string's residual whine still shivered in the air as he stepped over loose rock and drove a foot into a mass of downed timber. Dead branches snapped under his weight. He seized Ripez Yanks by the scapula and hauled him out, straight as a bundle of splintered firewood. Ripez Yanks coughed bloody froth. Before words could form, 2 sharp cracks rang from his knees. Soren's toes had found both kneecaps with surgical precision. Splintered bone punched through skin, jutting white. 2 fingers followed instantly, pressing into his Jisi and Dantian. The force went through with muffled thumps, the sound of cured oxhide bursting. Every drop of true chi in his body collapsed. His limbs flopped useless. He crumpled where he lay, unable to push himself up. Soren let go, stepped back half a pace, and looked down.
You want something done, you pay.
Ripez Yanks' throat bobbed. Grinding his teeth through the pain, he fumbled inside his robe with the arm that still barely worked. A single golden page came out, blood smeared sticky between his fingers, and golden light leaked through the gaps. The 4 seal script characters, Yin Yang True Intent, pulsed between bright and dim. He shook, and a thin secret manual also tumbled free, its cover drenched dark.
Wandering wind art. Only these are left.
Soren took them. The items vanished into his silver bell token. He grabbed Ripez Yanks by the scruff of the neck and strode deeper into the valley. Thud. Ripez Yanks hit the dirt at Pure Yang's feet. The golden page of true essence of 2 primordials was extended toward the Taoist in the same motion. It struck the ground, puffing dust. Pure Yang snatched it up, fingers shaking.
It's fortunate. Lord Shen was here.
Taoist Qingjing's Dao blade still hung in the air, its tip aimed at Kong Jing's throat. He stared down at the golden page and let out a long, slow breath. When his eyes shifted back to Ripez Yanks, the fury in them had burned down to cold ash.
The 2 excellencies will demand this redress for White Cloud Abbey.
Kong Jing pressed himself against the stone wall, pinned between their blades. Every feather stood rigid. His eyes found his parents' corpses sprawled across the ground. He turned and met Soren's approaching silhouette, that angular androgynous face, twisted violently. Despair flooded into something feral.
I'll take you with me.
The azure plume on his right arm had lit no more than half an inch when Soren's palm came slashing down. Boom! A muffled blast. Jing's skull detonated into a spray of blood mist. His fiendish body swayed and crashed, shifting back to its true form. Soren drew his ink saber and moved. Cut the abdomen, extract the core. The motion flowed like water. The nascent core was still scalding in his palm. He turned to the two elder fiends next, working through them as blood reek churned the air. Two fully condensed core formation fiend cores dropped into his pocket. One after the other, silence returned to the wilderness. The only sound was blood dripping from the blade's tip. Pure Yang and Taoist Jing stood frozen. Their throats worked. They retreated half a step without meaning to. Ripez Yank sprawled in the dirt. A sound rattled out of his throat, somewhere between a laugh and his last breath. Blood vessels crawled across the whites of his eyes. He stared at Jing's corpse and murmured,
How utterly liberating.
Rosalind stepped forward.
Should we escort you to the Demon Suppression Division?
Might I trouble the two Taoist elders to bury me together with Jing?
Ripez eyes were already scattering. He looked at Pure Yang.
Sandrift Valley. My boys will repay in equivalent value. You have my word.
Pure Yang's knuckles went white around the hilt. He bent down at last. His Dao blade swept across the man's neck in a swift line of light. The cut was thin as a red silk thread. Taoist Jing sighed, tugged his old comrade's sleeve, and disappeared behind the collapsed house. Only a parting remark remained.
You agreed to this. Bury him yourself.
Rosalind stood still until the footsteps faded. Then, quiet.
We nearly died here with you.
Soren worked the ache from his arm bones.
I have the Tortoise Breath Sutra. Glanced at it a couple times when I first entered.
Otherwise, he'd never have made straight for Ripez Yanx's hiding spot. Rosalind blinked, her eyes closed, her breathing settling. When she opened them again, her gaze held nothing.
Then I'll trouble General Rosalind to clean up the aftermath.
Soren turned his back and walked toward the valley mouth. Rosalind rested a hand on her saber, nodded once, and turned alone toward the wreckage, strewn ground. Soren sat cross-legged in a secluded corner of Dusk Valley, flipping through the thin booklet until the last page.
Slain a Core Formation Completion Stage Peacock Fiend. Total lifespan, 6,100 years. Remaining lifespan, 1,726 years. Absorbed. Slain a Core Formation Initial Stage Peacock Fiend. Total lifespan, 5,200 years. Remaining lifespan, 807 years. Absorbed. Slain a Nascent Core Stage Peacock Fiend. Total lifespan, 4,200 years. Remaining lifespan, 2,820 years. Absorbed. Remaining Fiend lifespan, 5,837 years.
He placed the fully condensed Core Formation Peacock Fiend core into his mouth. A vast torrent of Fiend lifespan poured into his chi-si. First year, you direct the death intent, grinding it toward the Toad Sovereign's consciousness. Nothing unexpected. Only a matter of cost. Soren withdrew his attention. His awareness sank inward. Deep within flesh and sinew, another consciousness flared awake, then fled in panic, only to find itself hemmed in on all sides by the death. Intent, the Toad Sovereign's lifespan, bled away layer by layer. That thread of awareness eroded bit by bit.
Year 203. The Toad Sovereign's consciousness is extinguished. You begin to attempt the fourth molt of the Celestial Demon.
The Fiend core dissolved. New strength condensed. The lifespan drain accelerated into something terrifying. 700 years. 1,400. 2,000. Inside his chi-si, a sparrow's cry shot skyward, sharp as a blade. The twin origin forces Azure and Crimson detonated in a single blast, twining like two dragons coiling through his meridians. They scoured every inch of flesh and blood. Skin, bone, sinew shuddered in unison. Layer by layer, the old body was torn apart and rebuilt. Between the 5 fingers of his right hand, Azure radiance coalesced. Its razor chi hissed as it sliced the air. Beyond his fingertips, vegetation fell away in silence, severed without a sound. In his left palm, crimson light flowed like mist. A deep warmth spread beneath the skin, like a spring stream rolling over sinew and bone that had been strained for years. The sore ache of a drawn bowstring, the deep-set fatigue of days on the run. In one breath, the light devoured it all. Gone, no trace. A cold, precise voice surfaced in his mind, as if words were being carved into the folds of his consciousness.
Year 2430. Another fiend takes shape within your body, far more vicious than the ones before. Assume the mantle of the Southguest Immortal. A spirit bird descends upon a jade terrace. Azure Plume severs mountains and rivers. Crimson Plume regenerates flesh from bone. With a thought of slaughter, all living things tremble. With a thought of mercy, all living things return to spring. Asterisk.
Soren let his eyes drift shut. His body had finally crossed that threshold, the fourth molt of the celestial demon. A physique equal to the perfected core condensation realm. He rested his palms on his knees. Azure light swam in his right hand. Crimson light gleamed in his left. The azure radiance was sharp beyond measure. The slightest twitch of a fingertip tore the air itself. The red radiance was gentle beyond belief, like a spring well brimming over with warmth. A soft breath escaped him.
Over 2,400 years of fiend lifespan. A few centuries less than he'd estimated.
His focus dropped to a line of text only he could see.
Remaining fiend lifespan, 3,407 years. Asterisk.
Wandering winged art. That newly acquired heaven-sundering Sunday bow, if paired with a movement art of that subtlety. Then across the whole of Azure province, barring a Core Formation Fiend lord, he would have nothing left to fear.
He poured in more fiend lifespan.
First year, you open the wandering wind art. Asterisk.
Soren's jaw clenched. There it was, that feeling.
Third year, you can recite the text backward and forward, but your mind remains a complete void. This art is nothing like any lightness skill you have ever cultivated. Asterisk. 22nd year, you close your eyes, focusing on the breeze brushing past your body. When you open them, you are standing 10 yards away. Horror crashes through your mind. This is not lightness skill. This is translocation. But when you try again, you cannot grasp that sensation at all. Asterisk. 47th year, your restless heart settles at last. You turn, take a single step forward, and your form dissolves into a clean wind, reappearing 30 yards away. Wandering Wind Art Minor Achievement. Asterisk.
All at once, the whisper of the wind against his ears sharpened into vivid clarity. Not louder, but every trajectory of airflow stood out like a filament of silk. Strands of hair stirred without wind. The hem of his robe lifted gently. It was as if his whole being had merged into the drifting currents around him. A flicker of divine intent, and he'd ride the wind itself. The jade dew within his chi-si accelerated its flow in response. Fiend lifespan continued to bleed away. The wind in his ears vanished. Soren lifted his eyes.
732nd year. You vanish from where you stand, then reappear. Your feet have not shifted an inch, yet you know with absolute certainty, if you will it, you can arrive 100 yards away in a single instant. You no longer ride the clean wind. You are the clean wind, unfettered and free. Wandering Wind Art Perfection. Asterisk. Remaining fiend lifespan, 2,675 years. Asterisk.
Deep in Dusk Valley, the stench of blood still clung to the air. The jade-green pool was stained a dark, viscous crimson, thick as iron rust that would not dissolve. Rosalind stood at the pool's edge, her fingertips traced across the last demon pelt. The sound of hide-parting flesh was crisp and clean. Her hands moved fast and steady, sorting and packing the valuable spoils in moments. When she pulled 4 long plume feathers from the demon corpse, azure and crimson light slid between her fingers, like 2 living fish. The azure plume gleamed with a cold light, so sharp you could almost hear the wind threading through a forest. The crimson plume pulsed with gentle heat, quivering faintly, as though a heartbeat drummed inside. Rosalind's breathing paused for half a beat. In all her years wandering the world, the number of demon spoils that could make her eyes light up could be counted on one hand. With a flip of her palm, she gripped the plumes together, pressing her fingertips down over that leaping spiritual vitality. Nearby, Taoist Jing scooped up a handful of soil and scattered it over 2 fresh graves. Before them stood a blue stone marker. The epitaph was freshly carved. Stone dust still clung to the etched characters. Pure Yang stood before the marker, hands clasped behind his back. He said nothing. He just pressed down on the hilt of his sword as he faced the grave of Ripez to Yanks. Then he turned and walked back toward the pool. Taoist Jing flicked water from his hands and sighed.
30 years. Nurturing the arts of White Cloud Abbey. And we couldn't even bring down a single fiend hidden inside a formation array. Brother, Yan's journey here, in the end, it is a debt we owe him.
His voice cut short. He halted mid-step. And he wasn't alone. Pure Yang's breathing dropped to near silence in the exact same moment. In the distance, a young man in ink-dark robes was approaching through the forest. His gait was unhurried, each step impossibly light, as if he walked on wind, on the gaps between rustling leaves. The breeze slid past his shoulders and did not stir his robes. It was pressed flat, subdued into submission. The sensation was impossible to pin down, as though his entire being was embedded in the very rhythm of Dusk Valley. Breath synchronized with the wind, footsteps resonating with grass and tree. The Tao follows nature. Taoist Jing and Pure Yang exchanged a glance. Their pupils contracted in the same instant. Then came the pressure, an impossibly faint coercive chi settling over them without a sound. The air tightened like a fist. The two old Taoists felt their spines snap rigid. Pure Yang swallowed hard. An image flashed through his mind, Kongjing's skull exploding under a single palm strike. The hand he had pressed against his sword hilt crept, without conscious thought, deeper into the sleeve of his robe. Soren approached and came to a halt. His gaze swept across the group, indifferent. There was no particular warmth in that look, but Taoist Jing felt the fabric of his chest piece plaster itself against his skin, pulled taut by the sudden, rigid stiffness of his own body.
Finished. Then let's go,
Soren said, nodding to them. Rosalind spoke before anyone else.
Take these plumes first. The rest of the scattered goods, I'll turn in everything. Have them converted into martial temple purification credits for you.
She extended her hand. The 4 feathers laid bare across her palm. Soren glanced at them. His expression held no change.
Split things according to the demon hunter's rules. I'll take my portion. That is enough.
Silence hung for a beat. Rosalind arched the tip of one brow.
I know you are a body-tempering martial artist, but this crimson plume, even if you never refine it into an artifact, just carrying it on your person can nourish the body and heal wounds.
I know.
Soren dipped his chin. Not a single thread of hesitation in his tone. Taoist Jing's breath deepened. His gaze fell uncontrollably upon the 4 plumes. The cyan one frigid, the crimson one scorching, gently swaying in Rosalind's palm, their scattered glimmers twining around her fingertips like silken threads. Pure Yang gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, his voice came out muffled.
Nature's Droshand. One shouldn't receive rewards without merit. To speak of it would invite ridicule.
The words had barely left his mouth when Taoist Jing sighed beside him. White Cloud Abbey, beyond its yin, young true intent, excelled in crafting artifact treasures. Materials of this grade from fiends were like a master carpenter beholding a treasured tree. Every bone in his body itched with longing.
What Nature's Droshand bestows? Do you have the right to refuse?
With a twist of her wrist, Rosalind stuffed all 4 plumes directly into Pure Yang's arms.
Don't waste good materials. Once the artifacts are crafted, keep one for yourselves, and send the rest to the Verdant City Demonbane compound. Say they're for General Shen under Elder Chen's command.
Pure Yang's hand, which had just withdrawn into his sleeve, jolted sharply. He opened his eyes, and in the end both hands reached out. The moment his bony knuckles touched the plumes, cyan and crimson light flowed up along his fingers, making the wrinkles beneath his crane, like hair seemed to glow.
Many thanks for next shares. Zhou Shen's generous gift.
His face broke into a grin, wrinkles scrunching together like a child who'd been handed candy. Taoist Jing blushed, crimson, and wrenched his head away. Soren watched, mildly bewildered. Clearly they'd gone from receiving free goods to doing someone else's labor. Yet they could be this happy. He rubbed the spot between his brows, then turned and walked toward the valley's exit. The carriage rumbled through the gates of Tingyang City. The setting sun, like shattered gold, sifted through the curtain. The cries of street vendors and the bustle of daily life mingled with light and shadow, swirling around the carriage walls. Rosalind cast a sidelong glance at Soren. Her crimson lips parted slightly, then pressed together again, before she finally asked softly,
Are you thirsty?
Soren rolled his eyes inward, holding back a sigh. The words never came. The silver bell token at his waist, and the bronze chime threaded between Rosalind's fingers began to hum in perfect, unsettling unison, a low thrum that settled deep in the teeth, that resonant drone of a wasp boring straight into the bone. Soren ran a thumb across the bell's cool surface. Just idle chatter, nothing to do with fiends. The flicker of disappointment in his eyes was quick, there and gone. Across from him, Rosalind rubbed the bronze chime between her fingers, an involuntary, curious stroke. Then she spoke the words half, muttered almost to herself.
Azure's left Riverside Commandery?
The silence that followed was absolute, like a blade had dropped. The two old Taoists seated across from them sat up, spines drawing taut, the cloudy film in their eyes retreating before a sharp, predatory glint. Soren lifted his head.
Who is Azure?
The air in the carriage turned brittle. Pure Yang's eyes bulged. He was sure he'd misheard. A demon suppression officer who didn't know Azure. That was like a chancellor who couldn't hold a brush. Rosalind choked back her shock, her voice coming out tighter than she intended.
Elder Chen brought her to Riverside Commandery to deal with a fiend outbreak. After what happened at Verdant Peak, the mountain started crawling with core formation level signatures. Porting in, slipping out. The yin spirits couldn't even get a lock.
Soren's face didn't shift, but behind the dark fall of his hair, the faintest ghost of a dry, humorless smile touched the corners of his eyes. Teleporting, core formation perfected fiends. That was just the mess he'd made forming his heavenly demon outer pill. They had the process completely wrong, and yet somehow the conclusion was dead right. Funny that he didn't correct them. His gaze just drifted back to the carriage window. The carriage rolled to a slow halt. Outside the general's residence, the first lanterns were being lit, their flames shivering in the dusk air. Youngie hopped down from the driver's seat, and the guard captain at the gate, whose face was built for frosty severity, took one look at the group and let that cold mask crack. 2 White Cloud Abbey elders, a Silver Bell exorcist, and that unnervingly handsome young man, all arriving together. Under the weight of their presence, guest rooms materialized with swift, silent efficiency. Soren was escorted to a secluded courtyard. He shut the door, the latch clicking home with a soft finality. Settling cross-legged on the bed's edge, he turned his awareness inward. The heavenly demon outer pill hung motionless above the Sunforged treasure furnace. When he opened his eyes again, veins of dark crimson fiend power had risen beneath his skin, like a web of cooling magma, searing and vicious. He deployed the outer pill. The air around him warped, drawn in by that ravenous pull. The residual cultivation locked within the tiger core drained away, and the outer pill's capacity swelled to 60%. His expression didn't flicker. Kong Jing's nascent core came next, its fiend power unspooling thread by thread into his waiting meridians. The moment the reserves hit 85%, the Sunforged treasure furnace gave a violent shudder, a metallic ring singing through his bones. The dark crimson veins throbbed, straining. Enough. Soren pulled his breath in, steadying the furnace. Push any harder and something would break. He reeled the outer pill back into his chi sea, then turned his hand over. From the silver bell token, he teased out that single strand of Mountain Lord's aura. It coiled around his fingertip, silent, a cold gold gleam, like light running along a drawn edge. With this much amplification, killing a Mountain Lord was well within reach. He lifted his head and looked south. A soft knock at the door. A woman's voice followed, low and familiar.
Can I come in?
Soren glanced up as Rosalind pushed the door open. The corridor lanterns behind her blazed with a deep vermilion glow, washing over her freshly changed red dress and making the silk seem to smolder. Her expression held a note of anticipation as she started.
It has been too long since we were back in the city. Do you want to head out and...
Her eyes snagged on the strand of golden Mountain Lord light between his fingers. Her whole body went still. The eager anticipation drained from her face, replaced by something more quiet. A tired, helpless exhale she tried to hide. Soren rose slowly, the muscles along his spine locked up without warning, that sensation of a cold weight pressing to the nape in the dead of night, breathing ice down his back. The severed grudge still festered in the direction of Zaitai Mountain. This Mountain Lord, its spawn killed. It hadn't fled to White Deer territory. It hadn't struck when he'd entered Peacock Valley. It had done nothing. Just waited. What the hell for? Soren couldn't bring himself to puzzle it out. The creature wanted his life. That was enough. Hit first, his fingers closed around that thread of aura, his eyes holding not a trace of hesitation. Rosalind's voice dropped.
Back then, I didn't tell you the whole truth.
She lifted her eyes, lashes trembling just slightly, and the sight of Soren's utterly unruffled face only made her more uncomfortable. She pushed on.
That strand of aura was supposed to be your reward. The idea of actually killing a mountain lord. At the time I never thought it could be done. So I deceived you. It should have fled to the fiend territories outside Riverside Commandery by now.
Why impossible?
Soren's tone was flat, but his gaze settled on her with something close to interest. Back in Yong'an City, this woman had carried herself with cool, almost dismissive arrogance. Now, as if she were afraid of his temper, she watched his face like she was reading a weather vane.
Because that territory belongs to White Deer.
Rosalind pulled in a breath, and her voice came out thick, with dread she couldn't fully suppress.
Before the Mountain Lord left, it swore it would seek White Deer's protection. White Deer is its sworn elder brother, a genuine Core Formation Demon Lord. It has tormented Azure Province for years and lived to brag about it. It is far beyond anything we can touch.
She looked at Soren. He was still listening, his fingertips cinched around that wisp of aura. Not a twitch of retreat.
If I remember right.
Soren said, his gaze pulling towards some distant point past the door.
Riverside Commandery. It is that way.
He handed the wisp to her. Rosalind froze, took it, and focused. A rush of heat brushed her pale cheeks. The aura pointed unwaveringly to a location outside Tingyang Commandery. Sitai Mountain. Her lips moved. The words,
I am such a fool,
never made it out. Soren shook his head, cutting her short.
Not necessarily.
A mountain lord that neither ran nor attacked. It was biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to bury them both. He didn't need to guess a fiend's schemes. Anything he couldn't figure out he assumed was malice. In that case, he'd destroy it first. By the next morning, the demon suppression general's mansion rang with the sound of boots on stone. Rosalind's orders snapped from her lips, clean and without a second of doubt.
Relay riders stationed every 200 li. They rotate, no gaps, day and night. Tell General Yu. Short of compromising the overall strategy, he moves as close to Zitai Mountain as possible. If anything goes wrong, I'll reach the hunters through my silver bell token.
Pure Yang hurried toward her, but before he could speak, Rosalind waved the attendants away and turned.
The Mountain Lord's aura on Shitai Mountain Core Formation Perfected has been locked. Before Nistroshen leaves Azure Province, we kill it.
Pure Yang just stared. Taoist Jing opened his mouth beside him, but the old lament about killing the chicken to warn the monkeys died silent in his throat. In general, Xiao's eyes, that notoriously vicious mountain lord was just the chicken. The bloody demonstration Soren would use to make his authority known. Rosalind didn't wait.
Elders, do as you see fit.
She strode for the gate. This move would tilt the balance of Azure Province, a crushing weight that only she and Soren could shoulder. Once they stepped outside Tingyang City, survival was in heaven's hands. Outside the gate, two demon steeds snorted, shifting restlessly. Soren heard the footsteps and turned.
You are coming along?
Rosalind swung up into the saddle, the leather reins pulling taut in her fist.
My combat strength isn't in your league, but I've spent years tracking fiends. I can save you the time of a stealth search. Your breath suppression is terrifyingly deep. That is exactly why you should stay hidden in the shadows. Strike without warning. One lethal blow, and you vanish.
She remembered that journey to Blackstone Pool, the one where she'd escorted him, and the corner of her mouth tugged.
Just like before. Stay in the dark, and you'll be fine.
Soren vaulted onto his mount. All he said was,
I'll keep you alive.
Rosalind gave no answer. She yanked the reins, and the fine demon steed reared, hooves raking the air, clods of mud flying. The crisp, sharp rhythm of hoofbeats shattered the early morning quiet, and they galloped hard toward the edge of the city. 300 lie past Tingyang Commandery. The land fell away into a low barren slope. The two demon steeds were tethered to a dead tree, their muscles bunched and quivering. They pawed the dirt, white plumes of mist jetting from their nostrils. Nervous, guttural whinnies rolled in their throats as their eyes swept the wild horizon. Out there, the demonic aura ran thick and deep. Rosalind drew out the silver bell token. She struck the bell's inner wall with a soft tap of her fingertip, and a pale silver ring of radiance pulsed outward, rippling in a strange, deliberate rhythm. Moments later, an answering echo brushed her skin.
Everything's set.
She turned to face Soren, and cut straight to the heart of it.
When you hit with full force, what is the maximum range a fiend can't react inside?
Soren was quiet for a breath. The wind across the wasteland flattened. Even the demon steed stopped pawing the earth. His voice came soft and certain.
300 zhang.
Rosalind's hand froze, the bell still in her grip. The silver bell token buzzed against her sash. Its hum hadn't died yet. Her pupils tightened, a body refining martial artist instant burst of power. She could only imagine, But she crushed the shock in the next breath. No words, no confirmation. Both their lives were on the line. They were out here. She'd trust her comrade completely.
300 Zhang.
She said it like carving stone with a knife.
Not close enough to blow your cover.
She checked the demon, seeking artifact one last time, and bolted towards Zitai Mountain. The wind snatched her hair ribbon, the fabric grazing her shoulder over and over, like a finger tracing a nerve. At the mountain's edge, she paused, looked back at Soren's hideout. Empty slope. But 300 Zhang away, a blade was already drawn. Rosalind turned and plunged into Zitai Mountain. The forest choked on its own shade. Dim dark stench and leaf wrought tangled into one foul mess. Rosalind kept the artifact humming, her nostrils twitching, hunting for that distinct mountain lord stench. Runes spun on the device, a pale glow flickering across her fingers, lighting up her hard, steady gaze. Her eyes raked the landscape, searing each sign into memory time dragged. She pushed deeper into Zitai. The sun smeared at the edges, a thin gray mist coiled in the sky. Relief washed over Rosalind's face. The silver bell token buzzed. She sent.
Just passed through. Artifact says southeast, the backcountry. 70 live from here. Stay sharp.
She turned and left. Job done. No point following. An executioner who moves silent through the deep mountains doesn't need backup that'd blow his cover. Silence. Then the silver bell token chimed with a terse reply.
You did good.
A breeze threaded through the trees. A tall figure in dark robes bled into the darkness, perched quiet on a branch. Soren kept his face still, but a whisper of unease turned in his gut. Not from hunting alone, he preferred that. His gaze swept the vast woodland, a lord checking his domain. But something had crept into his territory. That prick of irritation gnawed at him.
A mountain can't hold two tigers.
He leashed the thought. Tortoise breath, sutra maxed, wandering wind art at full bore. Soren melted into a fresh breeze and vanished through the canopy. Twigs mumbled against his robes, the faintest rustle. A toe kissed a branch, it sprang back, and he was already several Zhang away. The mountain lord's own power veiled him. Zitai Mountain lay empty for him. Nothing alive could catch his trail. Even half suppressed, he tore toward that marked territory at a horrifying clip. Then the silver bell token thrashed at his waist. Harder than ever, it nearly ripped itself free. A woman's voice, iron heavy.
Stop, something's off. Hold on.
Soren froze solid on the branch, a crease between his brows. No hesitation. He trusted a warning, especially from someone who knew exactly what he could do. The token flared again.
Second Fiend Lord Core Formation Perfection.
Soren's brow arched, that earlier pick of wrongness surfaced. Then another burst. Half a sentence, wind howling through.
Third one.
His face set. Then her voice again, straining steady but breath ragged.
Get out of Shitai. A fiend lord's on me. Explain later.
Soren's face turned blank.
Location.
Nothing wasted. 3 perfect core formation fiend lords. Killing all might be tough, but pulling Rosalind out. No problem. He yanked the straight Yi saber free, its edge glinting cold. No hesitation, he fired the heavenly demon outer pill. Power exploded from his dantian, cranking the wandering wind art to its screaming peak. He became a crimson, streaked hurricane, blasting back the way he came. Dead leaves caught in the sudden gale ripped to dust midair. The token flickered for a long, long while, so long Soren nearly spoke again. Then it came, weak, splintered.
Trap. Get back fast. I am safe. Ruined temple, peak.
Soren had already hit their split point. He sheathed, brow rising, safe before he got there. How? He looked up at the peak. If he didn't know that voice was Rosalind, he'd suspect a fiend had snatched her and was luring him into a death trap. In these fiend-infested mountains, even he wouldn't call anything safe. But the woman, yeah, probably trustworthy. Soren double-checked his aura, cycling the tortoise breath sutra, sealing every leak. The heavenly demon outer pill sat cocked. At the first sign of danger, he'd blow it wide open. Then he moved toward the peak. The peak, a ruin. Left over from when Azure province managed Zitai, now crumbling, drafty, soaked in decay. A half-deity statue lurched on a fractured altar. Old dust shimmering in the firelight, golden motes floating. Dead leaves heaped in corners. No incense, no offerings. A shape in ink-black robes reclined. A woman, hair tied back, simply remote and cool. Thick lashes, eyes still as a deep well, no ripple. An exquisite face, unadorned, skin like fresh cream, but the firelight washed it pale. Right hand on her knee, long pale fingers wrapped around a wine jar. The other hand rested on Rosalind's forehead, smoothing tangled hair. Those fingers gleamed like white jade moving light, sure. Under that touch, Rosalind's ragged breath steadied, Her face slackened, and she slipped into a sleep deep as an infant's, here in fiend-ridden Setai. Beside this person, she was safer than inside the Azure Demon Suppression Bureau. When Rosalind's breathing eased, the woman in black glanced up toward the door.
Please, come in.
Flat, but not unkind. The words hung, the wind sighing outside. After a long beat, the young man's shape solidified just outside. He stepped in, unhurried, and dropped into the corner farthest from the fire, and from her. Soren didn't like getting close to anyone who threw him off, and she'd spotted his hide with a single glance. No coincidence. Pointless to pretend. Silence swallowed the ruin, only the fire cracking. Neither broke at first. Soren shut his eyes and regulated his breath. The woman drank in quiet. The wine stung the air, sharp enough to sting his nose from across the room. Clear liquor rushed past her lips. A faint shimmer at her throat. Her face stayed still as stone. Only that pale cast to her skin eased a little. The jar emptied. She set it aside. Her gaze drifted to Soren, skipping over the ink saber at his belt. A brief stop, not a stare. Something flickered in her eyes, a half-remembered thing. She pulled her hand from Rosalind and stood.
I am going to kill fiends. Coming?
Polite, easy. Soren opened his eyes.
What kind?
The white deer, and the fiend lords it gathered to jump me. Don't know how many, but plenty.
She stood, hands loose.
That's Selim?
Soren got up. They came for the mountain lord. But this was something else, didn't matter. Fiends were fiends. Only question, could he keep up?
There's no information.
The young woman said, flat as a statement of weather.
By all logic, they should have run. They haven't.
If they should run and don't, it's a trap. Simple arithmetic, you know that. And you're going anyway.
Soren's eyes widened. A fraction.
I know the Howling Moon Fiend King's location.
She opened her palm. A long silver needle spun into existence, slender and silent. The moment it materialized, the mountaintop temperature nosedived. Frost crawled from the needle point, blooming into white ice flowers that layered across the shattered god. Statue layer by layer until the broken altar was a web of frost cracks. Only Rosalind beside her stayed untouched, her breathing steady and serene. The silver needle hung in place, building a barrier around the sleeping woman. The ink-robed girl pulled back her hand, lifted her eyes past the ruined temple, and spoke as if reading from a ledger.
So long as that one is absent, the rest are all the same.
She stepped out of the temple. Only after the barrier held did she truly start walking away, leaving the second half of that thought unspoken. The part about what exactly the rest were. Soren watched her ink-black silhouette recede. His mind was already set, to see through a cheek-concealing art in one glance and earn Rosalind's trust that deeply. She was either a demon-suppressing general or a Golden Bell demon hunter. He didn't waste time chewing on it. He stepped out of the temple, scavenging like this. Not an opportunity you found once you left Verdant Peak. The two figures entered the desolate ridge, one after the other. Azure glanced back just once, a dip of the chin the barest acknowledgement. She'd read the dossiers passing through Azure Province. That ink saber wasn't unfamiliar. She pulled her gaze away and kept walking toward the back mountain, pace unhurried. She'd given the warning. She never interfered with another's choices. Soren didn't relax. Her aura was razor, sharp and completely unrestrained, almost oppressive, and that only honed his alertness. To ambush someone at her level, the fiends would have backup plans laced inside backup plans. Scavenging was scavenging, but he had no plans to bury himself in the process. One thing nagged at him. Why would a cultivator of that caliber forego lightness arts entirely? Was she really going to walk every single li on foot? Before the thought finished forming, a screech tore the night apart. A crystalline longsword ripped through darkness, its blade wreathed in suspended ice crystals whose shards scattered moonlight. Cold bit to the marrow before the strike even arrived. In the next heartbeat, a black shape was hurled out of the distance and slammed into the ground at Soren's feet. A tiger fiend over 10 feet long, belly impaled by that frost ice longsword. Its blood had frozen solid, its howls cracked and shattered mid-throat. The body hit, earth shuddered, a ring of icy fragments jumping into the air. Its limbs twitched, claws gouging white streaks into the frozen soil, eyes drowning in terror. It wanted to beg, wanted to run, but under that sword, struggling was a joke.
This Lord Jing, had nothing to do with it. It was all White Deer's scheme.
Azure may as well have been deaf. She only looked at Soren, voice soft.
I'm not a demon hunter. No need for courtesy.
Something flickered and died in Soren's eyes. The tiger at his feet was almost certainly his mission target. Without a heartbeat's pause, his fingers clamped the saber hilt, arm muscles bunching. The blade traced a cold arc behead, extract the heart, carve out the core. 3 movements in a single fluid breath. Tip met fur resistance. Warm fiend blood spraying the steel before the chill turned it to frost. Flowers, a wisp of heart's blood seeped into the silver bell token. The inner core dropped into his hand. Azure stood to the side, a ghost of reminiscence in her gaze that faded as fast as it came. She waved a hand. The frost, ice longsword dissolved back into a silver needle and sank into her palm. 2 words.
Let's go.
Half an incense stick later, the same chill descended. A purple shape crashed from the air, a purple sable this time, its chance to speak denied as Soren's backhand swept its throat. The blade sparked across sleek fur. He wiped the steel clean in the same motion, and by the time he straightened, the inner core was already stored inside his bell. The third something fell from the sky. Soren didn't let it touch the ground. He vaulted, cleaving air, blade, light slashing night. The massive body of the Golden Eagle Guard lost its head before it could crash. His hand plunged into the corpse and yanked free the core, the whole sequence so fast it looked like muscle memory. This time, Azure didn't wait. Her gaze had already shifted to the distant heartlands. The last Golden Eagle Guard died right in front of White Deer, even cowering behind it, fleeing hard. One sword strike pierced them both through. White Deer tread on empty air, each hoof, fall-blasting ring-shaped shockwaves that flattened every scrap of vegetation within reach. Its antlers blazed like a blood-crusted crown, sinister luster bleeding off them. But its crystalline eyes held nothing but grievance and fury. A roar detonated, rattling leaves from the branches.
I've never even been to Verdant Peak.
Its voice boomed like a bronze bell.
You chased me from Riverside Commandery, all the way to Tingyang Commandery, over a baseless accusation. Jade Mountain Commandery's general tried to kill me first. I only struck back. Aside from that, when has this lord ever provoked you?
The desperation sharpened.
Would I be insane enough to provoke a sovereign?
It wanted to throw more words into the air, but Azure's expression stayed utterly unchanged. Her steps remained unhurried as she closed the distance. With every step she advanced, White Deer retreated, a Core Formation Fiend lord, with not a shred of majesty left. Only when the ink-robed girl fully entered the heartlands did the fear in White Deer's eyes abruptly loosen. Its retreat halted, it exhaled a long, turbid breath and chuckled low.
You forced my hand. Can't blame this lord for calling in a favor.
The words hit the air, and both hillsides heaved. Rock walls split. Boulders tumbled with the ground, shaking roar. Nearly half the mountain shattered. Dust boiled, and a gargantuan stone throne heaved upward, crimson mist flooding the peak like a tide. A colossal figure lounged against the throne's back. Human body, bull's head. 2 massive curved horns stabbing toward the sky. One hand rested on a ring pommel saber, its moonlit blade throwing off a cold death gleam. The other propped up its jaw. Blood-red eyes looked down at the insect, like woman below. Scorching breath gusted between its tusks, sending pebbles skittering. At the foot of the stone throne stood a spear, wielding Old Hound Fiend, its aura deep and sunken. Another at Core Formation. The bull demon lifted its palm slightly, voice deep and hollow.
You go deal with him.
The old hound had just shifted its weight when White Deer rushed forward, smile dripping service.
No need for the young Fiend King's man to lift a finger. I'm no use at most things, but I'm fast. Let me handle it.
Only then did the bull demon return its stare to Azure. Its palm stroked the saber hilt, each word slow and weighted.
Azure, this king has longed for you a very, very long time.
Azure's ink-black sleeves stirred, just barely. The palm hanging at her cuff held no killing intent whatsoever. She didn't even lift her eyes. Thousands upon thousands of silver needles poured out from within her, frosting over in midair so fast they blurred into crystalline ice swords. Needle, spines condensed frost. Sword, edges layered with snow. In the blink of an eye, they filled the heavens. The cold chi spiraled upward with them, coalescing into an armored jade dragon of abyssal ice scales, sinister and serrated, coiling and swimming around her. Where its whiskers brushed the ground, grass and wood froze and shattered in the same instant.
1 incense stick.
Her voice was cold and clear as she turned towards Soren.
Can you hold?
Soren's brow flicked up. His peripheral vision caught White Deer starting its slow advance.
Should be no problem.
The words still hung in the air when his figure melted into the night breeze. White Deer's pupils contracted to pinpricks. The afterimage tore at its perception, so fast it felt like a blade. It had meant to wait until the youth ran farther off, retreat, observe from safety. Instead, its 4 hooves slammed down with explosive force. Boom, earth and stone erupting as it transformed into a streak of white light and hurled itself forward. Setai Mountain lay wrapped in swirling crimson mist. Soren's toe brushed a dead branch, and a pale blue cyclone bloomed under his foot. He floated away, a wisp of smoke drifting into the distance. Behind him, the white deer thundered across the earth, hooves blasting craters 10 feet wide into the mountain rock. Stone shards flew in every direction. Trees flattened under the gale of its passing, but the harder it chased, the further that wisp of smoke slipped away. Up in the treetops, Soren yawned. The wandering wind art, fueled by the heavenly demon outer pill, could leave even a core formation realm, demon lord choking on dust. He flicked his tongue, and a fiend core dropped from the silver bell token onto his lips. His throat bobbed. The fiend core dissolved the instant. It hit his mouth, a blazing torrent flooding straight into his dantian. A heartbeat later, an icy demonic force detonated deep inside. 3 seething currents of Yao energy coiled and ripped through his meridians in a frenzied clash. Soren's expression stayed flat. The life force inside him ground like a millstone, pulverizing the residual beast consciousness. A sable shrieked. A mountain lord roared. Then a golden eagle guard's piercing cry tore through his mind, and all the chaos fell silent. He opened his eyes. A faint layer of shattered, gold light floated in his pupils. The red mist cloaking the wilderness split apart, as though invisible hands tore it away. He could see with crystalline clarity now. The needles on ancient pines, dozens of lie away, the intricate grain of creek stones, even the shreds of grass, kicked up between the white deer's hooves. Soren straightened, the heaven, sundering Sunday bow in his grip. The great sun rune along the bow's limb blazed to life. Incandescent white flames erupted from the sigil's grooves, gilding half his face like molten gold. He drew the bowstring, casual, at full tension. The forest dimmed, as if every scrap of light had been swallowed by that perfect full moon arc. The white deer's galloping hooves screeched to a dead stop. Every hair stood on end. A terror rooted deep in its bloodline locked its spine rigid. No time to dodge. A blinding white beam ripped through the air. The arrow left the string with a heart-shattering shriek that hadn't yet reached its ears before the shaft punched concentric rings of white vapor through the sky. A visible shock cone. The white light smashed into its body with apocalyptic force. Protective Yao Qi disintegrated like paper. The stench of scorched hide exploded. Its colossal frame was hurled back hundreds of yards, gouging a bottomless trench through the earth. Trees along the path turned to dust. The smoke hadn't settled when it scrambled up. Chest ripped open, flesh mangled, the stink of charred meat thick in the air. Then the second white beam ignited on the horizon. Uncontainable terror flooded the white deer's eyes. It threw every ounce of strength into a sideways leap. The arrow skimmed past, but the mere shockwave ripped dozens of massive trees out of the earth and hurled them skyward like twigs. It crashed down hard. Blood sprayed from its mouth across the soil. And then, from deep within Setai Mountain's heart came a dull, thunderous roar, as if a dragon rolled over in the earth's belly. Part of the mountain range collapsed inward. A crimson Yao cloud punched through the debris, streaking skyward at unimaginable speed, gone in a blink. The frigid light of the profound ice jade dragon and the white glow erupting from Bull Demon's saber clash still flickered atop the peak before the entire mass sank with a cataclysmic roar. The ground undulated like ocean waves. The white deer trembled from head to hoof. It looked up and saw that the wisp of smoke it had been chasing had solidified. Soren hung suspended in the air. Residual white flames still licked the bow's limb. He lowered the bow tip. The arrows were spent, but those shattered gold eyes pierced through its heart like daggers. He raised his arm, cold indifference. Where his finger pointed, the white deer froze. Soren had been waiting for that precise moment when the white deer stood rigid, its mind blank and exposed. The steaming bath pool churned with great white swells. Water burst in all directions like shattered jade, and with it came soul-luring, enchanting laughter. 3 figures burst from the water, only wisps of pink gossamer clinging to them, silhouettes sinuous and ethereal through the mist. Golden light flared in Soren's eyes. The scene before him peeled away in layers, crumbling like a faded antique painting. That slick, supple skin of celestial maidens warped into coarse, matted fur. The fiend cores they clutched reflected a demonic, unnatural glow. The one leading them, it was the massive masculine white deer itself, waving pink gauze, throwing him coy, flirtatious glances. Behind it stood the bull demon, muscles bulging, the thin gauze stretched across its frame like a drumhead about to split. Trailing last came the gaunt, skeletal old hound, every rib starkly countable, just as bashfully pressing a fiend core to its heart. Soren's expression stayed utterly still, but a frigid tide surged within his eyes. His grip on the saber hilt tightened, knuckles grinding with a faint creak. Deep in the white mist, the white deer's eyes flooded with crimson veins. Fury nearly scorched through its chest. Its innate divine ability should have drawn out the deepest buried desires of any man. Even a block of stone should have reflected some enchanting silhouette. But what it saw was itself.
You motherfucking bastard! Bullying us to this extreme!
Grinding its silver teeth, the white deer erupted forward, hooves riding the wind, charging with manic ferocity. It feared the heaven, sundering Sunday bow, not the flesh and blood body of this youth before it. Those hard razor-sharp antlers swelled as they surged through the air, crashing down with the force of a collapsing mountain. The air compressed into shrieking gales. The ground detonated outward in concentric rings, sinking several inches with a muffled, crushing roar. Soren's black robes whipped violently. His left hand shot up, 5 fingers clamping like iron pincers onto the descending antlers. 2 terrifying forces met in his palm, and a ring-shaped shockwave swept across the land, bending the ancient pines around the pool in unison. The antler's descent slowed to a crawl, as if sunk into quicksand. Shock and rage twisted the white deer's face. It roared and poured another 50% of its strength into the strike. But before it could fully exert itself, the ink saber in Soren's right hand erupted with a cyan radiance that sliced through the darkness. The blade swept upward from below, unleashing a formless saber, light over 10 yards long. A hairline crack bloomed silently across the magnificent crown of antlers. Then, a crisp, shattering sound, like glazed porcelain exploding in ice water, mingled with a high-frequency screech. A third of the antler sheared off diagonally, crashing onto the ground so hard it sent tremors through the mountain rock for 100 yards. Before the white deer could mourn its broken horn, its peripheral vision caught Soren lunging forward, blade raised. Cyan light danced along the saber like ghost fire, viscous crimson yow force coiled around it, and the acrid stench of deadly poison stabbed into its nostrils. It slammed its front hooves down from midair. Soren didn't dodge or retreat. His right shoulder met the hoof strike head. On crack, the brittle sound of collapsing bone erupted with a spray of blood mist. But at that same instant, the ink saber cleaved deep into the white deer's spine. Venom hissed as it forced its way into muscle, scorching out nauseating plumes of green smoke and the stench of putrid flesh. The white deer's agonized howl tore from its throat. It felt the lethal poison eating through hide and bone at terrifying speed. Living muscle dissolving into green ichor, seeping toward its internal organs. Yet on Soren's shoulder, a crimson light flickered. The shattered bones popped and crackled like beans frying in a wok, knitting and mending themselves within the rising blood haze. Restored whole in the span of a single breath, he gave white deer no chance to draw breath. His form exploded forward again. The 2 figures crossed paths in midair 3 times. With each crossing, another bone in Soren's body shattered, only to reform in an instant beneath the crimson glow. And on white deer's body, a new hideous gash appeared each time. Venom burrowing deep into marrow, green fluid spilling across the ground in pools. The air grew thick with the acrid stench of searing rot.
You're drenched in venomous tricks, every inch of you filth. Don't you cultivate martial arts at all?
White deer finally felt true panic. It had been confident it could slip away from Azure, because that woman cultivated only the sword, a single path with no room for distraction. But the young man before it now, though clearly lower in cultivation realm, wielded technique after relentless technique, and he moved faster than even a Yow Lord famed for swiftness. A cold, sharp smile cut across Soren's face. He held nothing back now. A flick of his fingers, the heavenly demon outer pill shuddered. Demonic power, scarlet as fresh blood, gushed forth like a ruptured dam. It coiled around ink saber, hardening into a blade, chi of deep crimson, 10 feet long. The savage intent soaked the air in all directions before the strike even landed. White deer's spirit quaked. Helpless, it watched that crimson blade light slash down. Soren hovered in the air, staring at the massive deer, its body a ruin of wounds. He brought the saber cleaving down. The scarlet blade, she shrieked through the air, tore it apart, and split white deer's thigh to the bone with a wet, rending sound. Before blood could spray the ground, his form flickered. The blade punched through ribs from the side, ripped free, struck again in a blur. Fists hammered like landslides, whip, kicks cracked like thunder. Every strike glowed a virulent green, smashing hide, ripping flesh open. The scarlet blade chi slashed through every gap, each fall of the blade lifting a cloud of blood mist. White Deer's counterattacks stayed ferocious. It shattered Soren's bones again and again, but that crimson radiance burned like a deathless flame, remaking him a heartbeat later. His face showed no pain, only frozen killing intent, tireless, never backing down. At last, a thunderclap impact boomed across the battlefield. Soren seized the instant White Deer's focus wavered and stomped it brutally into the earth. Mountain stone ruptured, the ground caving deep into a crater. Ink Saber followed, plunging into White Deer's abdomen, pinning it fast amidst the shattered rubble. Soren flipped his hand and drew the celestial Sunday, piercing bow. Pulling the string, he might as well have seized a blazing sun in his grip. White radiance gathered along the bow's length, so piercing that White Deer's pupils shrank to pinpoints. Never once had it imagined a longbow released, with the string pressed against its skull. Twang! Heaven and earth fell mute. White light swallowed White Deer's terrified eyes, the scene frozen in that single moment. Then the shockwave bloomed outward, a wild swelling ring carrying shredded flesh in all directions. Across Etai Mountain, trees and grasses snapped and flattened. A keening whine filled the ears of countless living things. When the white light dissipated, the great deer beneath Soren was a headless corpse, charred black flesh still twitching. Breathing hard, he gave a wave and recalled Ink Saber. His gaze flicked toward the figure who had stood silent in the distance for some time. Azure had arrived at the edge of the battlefield at some unknown moment. She stood with lowered hands, watching in silence. Her presence, that alone had shattered White Deer's spirit in that final instant. Soren offered no further words. He bent low, tightening his grip on Ink Saber, and with his own hands cut through the charred, scorched hide. Amid wet, slick sounds, he reached in and gouged out a fiend core that glimmered like molten gold. With a casual motion, he stored the deer's corpse inside the silver bell token. Azure's gaze rested on the straight line of his back. A rare ripple stirred in her eyes, as if she were looking at a freshly honed blade, already drawn from its sheath and bared to the world. After a long silence, she gave a soft laugh, shook her head, and said only this:
"You're formidable."